Welcome everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to significantly improve your gameplay in Conflict of Nations with a few small tips. Even if you are already familiar with the game, you might pick up a few tricks you never knew before. First off, and this may sound silly, but what type of match and how soon you join it can dictate whether you get an advantageous position in the match early or not. To search for a match, firstly you want to ensure you are on the main menu. When on the main menu, tap Games on the bottom left, then when this tab opens, click Search on the middle right. Depending on how many players you want to play against and also how much time you have on your hands will dictate how you decide. For this example, we will be playing World War III 4X. So you'll want to tap on the search bar as search as I do. When you search, you'll be met with a list of games. Each game has an individual match code in the bottom left, the current day the match is on and how many players are in the match. To get the best possible outcome, you can refresh the search every now and again. And often when one game fills, another will pop up in its place with significantly less people, giving you a wider choice of countries. For this example, we will be playing as New Zealand, as I think it is a good option for newer players. There is a few reasons why I choose New Zealand as the example today, one of which is its relative isolation in comparison to other parts of the map, giving you more time to adjust to game mechanics and resource management. Speaking of which, in Conflict of Nations there are 7 types of resources, from left to right. Firstly is supplies, next is components, after that is fuel, electronics, rare materials, manpower, and money. These are all used for different things in the game and are generated by your cities. It's important to assess what you will need for the play style you are aiming for, and to ensure you're planning ahead. Which leads me to my next point. The country you play should always complement the way you're playing. For example, playing as New Zealand, all of your cities are vulnerable to naval attacks as they are all on the coast, which means you should definitely work on a navy as early as possible, as it can then stop enemies from landing troops on your cities, and further fight back against any naval incursions. Since we know we are gonna need a navy, we will navigate to the Research tab and select frigates. Frigates are a good initial choice as they provide air and sea cover to your cities when at port. Also, the frigate's relatively cheap price will allow you to produce enough to have every port covered in the first few days. With that in mind, you can't start to research the frigate until day 2, but from this tab we know we will need electronics and components to produce them, and a city with a level 2 port and arms industry to produce them in. With that in mind, we will use the resources we begin with to start building the infrastructure we will need to build said frigates, so that when we can research them we can produce them as soon as possible. Something I also forgot to mention earlier is arms industries are a key part of building a strong base economy, as they provide bonus resource production and cash generation for the city they are built in per upgrade, on top of what I mentioned earlier of the ability to produce certain units. Personally, I would recommend first building an arms industry in your fuel and electronic cities and then upgrade both ports as soon after as possible, allowing you to produce frigates at twice the rate. If you have leftover resources, it is a good idea to build army bases in your remaining cities in addition to recruiting officers, soon followed by arms industries. Though upgrade your fuel and electronic arms industries as priority, as this will later snowball into an excess of all materials. At this point in the video, it's a good idea to mention this strategy could also be applied even to a place like Chad, positioned in the center of Africa, though you'd replace the naval aspect with either helicopters or planes, and the ports with air bases. The point I'm trying to convey is to always let your geography be an advantage to you and not a disadvantage. Now I assume you are eagerly waiting to send your first men to conquer yourself some new territory. Well, while we are waiting to be able to make a start on our navy, it's a good idea to take a look at the infantry officer on the Research tab. The infantry officer is a special unit that can only be produced once per lifetime of the unit. Though expensive, they are in my opinion key to winning more battles and wars. Once researched, produce an officer along with infantry when you can in your cities with army bases. Assuming by now you have your first couple frigates, you can now free up your infantry from guarding the cities that have a frigate in port and gather them in Auckland. Once you have a frigate ported at Auckland and 9 of your troops and an officer unit, you are ready to start your first attack. The reason I said 10 troops and not 11 is because 10 is the maximum amount of troops you can have in a stack without taking a heavy penalty. This doesn't apply the same to naval or air, with their max stack being 5. The reason stacking your troops is effective is because you'll deal more initial damage to your target. If said target was a city garrisoned by 2 men, your stack would likely one-shoot or close to one-shoot the city's garrison, resulting in less long-term losses. It is also important to mention that before anywhere there are a few factors you must consider. First one is diplomacy. For example, if Australia and most of Central Asia are in a coalition, it's likely a good idea to try to either join and or target aggressively, as if you don't get a space but other surrounding neighbors do, you're likely a soon target. The second thing is reckon. For example, if we take a look at Australia's closest city, which is their capital Sydney, we can see he has built an army base and recruiting office, which means he's likely training infantry there. Furthermore, because it's his capital, we know it will likely be garrisoned by 2 infantry and an artillery unit, with a jet in their airfield. He will also get a further 25 defense bonus for defending, and a bonus 33% damage reduction from his level 1 underground bunker. There are also plenty of recon units to choose from later in the game that can provide even better intelligence. But knowing what you're up against is a great benefit. Another way to see if your neighbors are active or where people are expanding is by using the morale view in the game settings, with the dark red representing the areas that have recently changed hands. Now, with your first stack hopefully on its way to its first target, it's time to yet again plan ahead, further upgrading our ports to level 4 when feasible and researching the cruiser. In this playthrough, I'm going to use the full potential of my isolation and naval reliance by only producing cruisers, but only once each port is manned by at least 1 frigate. As I'm going to be heavily naval reliant, I'll make the preparations for myself to later be able to do so. It's also important to make sure your military ambitions never outpace or hinder your production, as each unit requires an upkeep, which you can check in details. And from there, the world is truly your oyster with the base concept of the game down. It's up to you how you expand, but a further tip to end on is to only focus on upgrading, researching 3 units at a time, as less can sometimes be more. When you have excess materials late game, then research the less essential. And with that, if you ever come across a new player, always help them out or give them a few pointers, as without new players, we have no community, and with no community means empty, inactive games. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.